everyone. Welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles, and this is the show where we explore the riches of our Catholic faith and how it informs our daily lives. Of course, before we get started with this discussion on Catholic Relief Services tonight, let's go ahead, as I always do, and seek the intercession of Our Lady, and I like to do so in the official language of the Church, which is Latin. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Tonight, for our first segment, we will be welcoming onto our show Mr. Stephen Mosher. He is a highly respected authority on issues concerning population control and a very long-time defender of life. He's been fighting coercive population control programs since 1979, and he's appeared before Congress and as an expert in world population, expert in China and human rights abuses. And he's also been on Good Morning America, 60 Minutes, The Today Show, 2020, Fox, CNN News. His articles have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Reader's Digest, The New Republic, Washington Post, National Review, Reason, Freedom Review, Lineker Quarterly, Catholic World Report, and many, many more. He's also authored a number of books. So it's a great delight and honor to have him onto my show. Welcome back, Stephen Mosher.
Well, it's good to be here.
You know, there's been a spotlight on Catholic Relief Services and some of their scandalous practices with regard to working with and giving money to groups that directly promote abortion, contraception, and sterilization. And you and your organization, Population Research Institute, did some investigations in Madagascar and uncovered some disturbing truths. And since that time, you've kind of suffered a little bit of backlash for this. Before we get into your recent report, the 119-page report, excellent, that your Population Research Institute recently issued, could you give our listeners who may not be familiar with this some background? What was it that inspired or motivated you and your organization to conduct an investigation on CRS in Madagascar in the first place?
Well, you know, my interest in population control programs goes back to 1979 when I was the first American social scientist allowed to live and work and study in the People's Republic of China, and found myself in the middle of the most horrible, horrific, barbaric population control program the world has ever seen. We know it as the one-child policy. Today, 30-some years later, it still involves forced abortion, forced sterilization, forced contraception. And we were able to cut off some of the funding that went from the U.S. government to this heinous program over the years. We've done investigations in other places as well. Although I have to say, never before had we done an investigation of Catholic Relief Services. We've investigated the UN Population Fund, USAID, of course, being the biggest promoter of abortion, sterilization, contraception in the world. Groups like International Planned Parenthood, Federation Marie Stopes, the big UK abortion provider. We got interested in the Catholic Relief Services story when a couple of large donors of Catholic Relief Services actually came to us. We didn't go to them. They came to us and they said, we're hearing disturbing things about Catholic Relief Services' involvement in family planning programs, their involvement in population control programs. They said, we know you have a history of carrying out investigations in different parts of the world, in China and elsewhere. Would you look into it? And, you know, I prayed about it, Christine, because it wasn't something I did lightly. Any time an organization has Catholic in their name, you tend to give them the respect that is due all of our co-religionists. But I decided, having heard the same kind of thing from LifeSite News and from American Life League and from other groups, especially over the last couple of years, I decided that we would take a close look on the ground at what was happening in a country where Catholic Relief Services was very, very active. And we picked the country of Madagascar, and I have to tell you, I think that was providential. We can get into why it was God-directed in a minute, but it was certainly providential we wound up in Madagascar because we found on the ground in Madagascar that CRS was doing things that no self-respecting Catholic agency should be doing. We found a lot of discontent with CRS from everyone from archbishops down to priests to the Madagascar Bishops' Conference down to ordinary lay people on the ground. And And during the course of a month-long stay in Madagascar, this was not a helicopter visit. We didn't just fly to the international airport, spend a couple of days talking to people, and leave. We had an investigator on the ground for 30 days. He was fluent in French, which is one of the national languages of Madagascar. He had worked for 30 years himself in the international aid business for groups like, he'd worked for various programs, USAID programs, and other programs overseas. So he knew the business of foreign aid inside and out. And what he came back with was really astounding and disturbing, and of course comprises the bulk of our 19-page report. Consists of interviews with people from archbishops on down, talking about the problems, the real problems that they saw with what they called so-called Catholic relief services
right.
on the ground in Madagascar.
Right. Before we continue this discussion about this report, could you just tell our listeners where they can find it, just in case they want to take a look at it, and while they're listening to the show?
Well, the report is available online at our website at pop.org. That's www.pop.org. POP is short for Population Research Institute, which is the organization that I'm the president of. And it's all there. It's under Madagascar reports. It's under investigations and reports. And I have to say that I believe that anyone who takes a close look at it will come away quite disturbed at the way that Catholic Relief Services has forgotten what its primary mission should be, preaching the gospel and administering the sacraments, and has become not just another humanitarian aid agency, but a humanitarian aid agency that confuses local Catholic bishops and local Catholic laymen and laywomen, because it claims to be Catholic, and yet on the ground acts just like USAID or CARE or these other groups that are involved in things that church teaching prohibits.
Right. Now, again, I would highly recommend my listeners to go ahead and take a look at this report. You can read it right there online. You can print it out if you want. It's 119 pages, and like Mr. Mosher said, it's comprised mostly of interviews on the ground there in Madagascar with bishops, priests, nuns, and lay people, and basically getting an idea of exactly how CRS operates there. And now, from what I understand, some of the African bishops had been trying for 2 years to meet with CRS and Bishop Kikanes to air their grievances about CRS. Isn't that right?
Yes, they had been so upset with Catholic Relief Services for such a long period of time that they had been trying to arrange a meeting, not with the Catholic Relief Services employees. They wanted to meet with the American bishops. They wanted to meet with their counterparts. The people in the United States, the bishops who are supposedly responsible for Catholic Relief Services activities. And they had been trying for 2 years to arrange a meeting, and they finally succeeded in having the head of CRS, Carolyn Wu, come, along with the chairman of the board of directors, Bishop Kikanes of Tucson, Arizona. And they told Dr. Wu and Bishop Kikanes that they were about their problems with CRS. And let me tell you what they were. First of all, they said that they didn't understand why Catholic Relief Services did not hire Catholics. They said that the Muslim charitable agencies hire Muslims, the Mormon charitable agencies hire Mormons, the Hindu charitable agencies hire Hindus, and yet Catholic Relief Services doesn't hire Catholics, or at least not very many Catholics. And the ones that it does hire don't seem to be very good Catholics, don't seem to be interested in spreading the faith and spreading the gospel. That was one of their complaints. The second complaint they had was that Catholic Relief Services was actually involved in a family planning program in Madagascar, which involved the distribution of abortifacient contraceptives, other means of sterilization and contraception, throughout a large part of the island of Madagascar. And Catholic Relief Services employees were actually in charge of community health workers who would go out and give Depo-Provera injections, among other things. And, of course, that's a chemical abortivation contraceptive that is injected into women that chemically sterilizes them for 3 months. And like all hormonal contraceptives, one of the ways it acts is by not preventing ovulation, not preventing conception, but by preventing implantation, that is, by killing a tiny human being, by preventing it from implanting in the womb of its mother subsequent to conception. So this is the sort of thing that the African bishops were very upset about. They also complained that they didn't understand why their brother bishops in the United States did not work through them. If they were going to carry out charitable activities in Madagascar, they said, why don't you work with us in our diocese and our parishes? Why don't you work through the Madagascar Bishops' Conference? Why do you come into our country and set up these large office complexes and hold meetings and carry out projects that you don't even involve us with? The Archbishop of the capital city said to our investigator, he said, there was a major meeting held in the capital city. He said that I only found out about by accident. And once I heard that there was this meeting taking place, I went to see it. And I was amazed at how big and grand the Catholic Relief Services headquarters was in the capital city. He said, I didn't even know they were here. And so the bishops of Madagascar in particular and Africa in general were upset because they are the bishops. They are the descendants of the apostles, the spiritual descendants of the apostles, and they're responsible for the souls of Catholics in their diocese. And here you had this supposedly Catholic agency operating without their foreknowledge or consent in their diocese. And when they found out that these things were being done, they went and complained, and CRS basically shrugged off their complaints and said, no, this is the way we operate everywhere.
Right. And, it was very disappointing. Right. It was disappointing the way CRS responded. It was also, quite frankly, disappointing the way that Bishop Kakanis responded, because there was really no dealing with the actual substance of the charges. It was more just sort of writing it off and saying that, well, we've consulted moral theologians and we have a careful vetting process, or just flat out denying that this, that CRS employees were doing the things that you were saying that they were doing.
Well, they were hiding behind this very complex organizational chart where they have all these different subcontractors of USAID, which is our foreign aid agency, which gives, by the way, Catholic Relief Services $500 million a year. And in order to get that government money, though, you've got to check your faith at the door. That is to say, if you take money from the U.S. government, guess what? You can't preferentially hire Catholics, because that would be what the U.S. government calls discrimination on the basis of religion. We wouldn't call it that as Catholics. I mean, if we're carrying out Catholic charity, I think we probably want Catholics to be doing it. And they weren't working directly with the bishops in dioceses overseas. Why? Because that would be, according to the U.S. government, discriminating in favor of one particular religion. Well, Catholic charity should be carried out through Catholic dioceses and with the permission of Catholic dioceses in the places where it's operating. So the things that it should be doing, it can't do because it's beholden to the government, because it gets all this money from USAID. And look, Catholic Relief Services knows very well who it works for. And it doesn't work for the U.S. bishops. It doesn't work for Catholics in the United States. It works for the agency that gives it 70% of its funding, and that agency is the U.S. government, primarily USAID. And let me illustrate that point. The head of Catholic Relief Services in Madagascar actually came into the office of the Archbishop of the capital city in Madagascar one day with a USAID sign and said, Archbishop, do you mind if I put this sign up in your office behind your desk because of all the good work that USAID does in your country? And he threw that woman out of his office. The Archbishop was furious because he knows that one of the things that USAID does in Madagascar and elsewhere is promote abortion, sterilization, contraception, and other things that are contrary to church teaching. And he told her to get out of his office and, of course, refused to put up the sign. But that shows you the close connection between Catholic Relief Services and USAID. You know, no man can serve two masters. You either love the one and hate the other, or you embrace the one and despise the other. And in this case, CRS is serving its master in Washington, D.C. that provides most of its funding.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, you mentioned the vast majority of CRS employees are not even Catholic. Something like 3/4 of them are not Catholic, and therefore it shouldn't surprise us then that they're not going to have a problem participating in family planning services, things like that, because, you know, Catholics believe that that's wrong, but if the vast majority of CRS employees are not Catholic, then they're not necessarily going to believe that there's anything wrong with contraception. So
right, and it's even worse than that, because in many cases, Catholic Relief Services will deliberately hire people who have worked for Marie Stopes, the big UK abortion provider. They hired in Madagascar to run their healthcare program that had this big population control family planning component. They hired a man who had worked for the United Nations Population Fund for 10 years. Why? Because he had the kind of professional qualifications that USAID was looking for, and it helped to CRS to get the money in order to hire somebody who was well-connected and well-trained in the population control business. And so if you tell me, CRS will say this. They will say, no, we only hire people who understand and respect what Catholic teaching is. You can't tell me that a person who worked for the UN Population Fund and promoting abortion, sterilization, and contraception around the world for 10 years, and who came to work for Catholic Relief Services, has any intention of respecting Catholic teaching and respecting Catholic beliefs on the life issues. That's just strange credulity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's dishonest. I actually wanted to read a short paragraph here from the introduction to this report. He says here, there's little doubt that CRS will accuse PRI of causing scandal by allowing, by means of this unexpurgated report, the complaints of African bishops and laity about CRS to reach the ears of their Catholic counterparts in the U.S., Canada, and Europe. We riposte that the true scandal is one of CRS's own making, for not only has it involved itself in programs that violate church teaching, it has also willfully ignored the just complaints of African Catholics about its activities. Instead of taking corrective action, it has instead sought to justify, cover up, and even in some cases to dissimulate about its continuing involvement in such programs. This is the true scandal. And of course, dissimulate means lie. And I'm sorry, that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of evasion, a lot of rationalizations.
That's right, and out-and-out misrepresentation as well, because the program, the family planning program that we found them involved in, where they were directly supervising the administration of Depo-Provera shots, they were saying, well, we didn't actually give the injections. We didn't actually distribute the contraceptives. Well, no, you may not have, but it's just a charade to say, if you're responsible for 250 community health workers who are doing these things, and they report to you, and your CRS employees know what they're doing and approve of what they're doing, and file reports to their superiors saying how many women they have chemically and surgically sterilized, you know what's going on, you are a party to it, and you are morally culpable for the consequences, even though you're not actually paying the community health workers directly. You're paying the people who supervise them. So that, saying that you're not responsible is absurd.
Right.
That was one of the things, of course, that upset one of the local archbishops tremendously. He said, my people came to me and said, this is supposed to be a Catholic group. How can they be doing these things? And yet they were. Now, Bishop Kikanis of Tucson, Arizona, when we complained to him about these activities, he said, why didn't you come to us first? And the response to that is, well, you knew, Bishop, because you met with the Madagascar bishops in last year in September of 2012, and you knew a second time about these complaints because you met with the assembled African bishops in Kinshasa in the Republic of the Congo in November of 2012. So he had twice been at meetings where these specific complaints were aired. So it seemed to us that he knew about the complaints, CRS knew about the complaints, had done nothing in terms of corrective action, and so it was time to make our report public.
Right, and I'm very glad that you did. Now, they also aired their grievances to the Pontifical Council Cor Unum as well, didn't they?
They also complained to Cardinal Robert Serra, who is the head of the Vatican Dicastery, the Pontifical Council Cor Unum, which means one heart in English, which is the head of all of the charitable activities of the Catholic Church around the world. It heads Caritas Internationalis. And Cardinal Robert Serra was actually at the meeting in Kinshasa in the Congo where Bishop Kakanis was present as well. And with him were the heads of the African Bishop Conferences, were the heads of the African Caritas group. And the talks that were given made it clear in no uncertain terms that there were real problems with the way that the northern charities, which is how Cardinal Robert Serra referred to them. He said the northern charities need to consult with the Southern Caritas bishops' conferences. They need to sign agreements with them. They need to operate under their authority and with their permission in their diocese. Well, we've already mentioned why that is difficult for CRS, because if it starts working as a Catholic charity through the Catholic Church, guess what? USAID is going to come and say, you can't have all that luscious money because you're favoring one religion over another. But for a Catholic not to favor members of his co-religionists doesn't make sense. I mean, even St. Paul says in Galatians chapter 6, verse 10, that therefore let us do good to all, but especially to those of the family of the faith. So we're saying, yes, we should not turn away the hungry or the sick. We should clothe the naked, but we should especially help those of the family of the faith. And if you work through the parishes and through the diocese, that's what you're going to be doing. You're not going to be turning anybody away, but you're going to be helping members of the family of the faith, as St. Paul tells us to, preferentially.
Right. Well, the bottom line is they don't want to give up 70% of their revenue. I think that's kind of the bottom line.
Yet, yeah, it really is. It really is all about the money at the end of the day. But my feeling about that is this: so much of the money they get from the government is wasted. They have to have accountants to track every penny. They have to file reports every week. They have to have lobbyists in Washington to keep the funding spigot open, to keep the money flowing. They have to maintain a huge presence in the United States. They work with these other groups overseas. They have to have separate headquarters in national capitals. All this costs money. If they were to do away with the government money, the $500 million, and just depend on the $200 million they get from ordinary Catholics, they could do a lot more good with that $200 million than I believe they can do with the $700 million. Why? Because they could take that $200 million, they could go to the 1,000 poorest parishes or poorest dioceses in the world, or the 200 poorest dioceses in the world, send $1 million to the bishops of each of those dioceses and say, look, Bishop, you know what the problems are in your local diocese. You know where charity needs to be done. You know what the basic needs are that need to be filled. You take this money and use it to do charitable works, and then tell us at the end of the year how you used it. Do you know how much good could be done if you simply freed up the bishops and empowered them in that way to meet the needs of their own people in their own diocese? I think you'd do more good that way than by setting up these huge headquarters in capital cities and working according to USAID guidelines, which prevent you from being truly Catholic and helping Catholics.
Absolutely. I mean, on top of that, you have a clear conscience. You wouldn't be facilitating groups like PSI and CARE, which are directly promoting intrinsic evils. I mean, it makes complete sense. You said here in your conclusions and recommendations, I just want to quote here, there are two fundamentally different visions of what Catholic charity should be. The first which is espoused by many current CRS employees, is essentially secular and humanitarian. The second, which is espoused by the Church, is sacred and Trinitarian. I think that's a very good
and Cardinal Robert Serra, in his very good address at the Kinshasa meeting last November, elaborated on those points, and said that the Church's responsibility in carrying out charitable works is not primarily to create a perfect society. Social problems, he said, are primarily the responsibility of governments. Our responsibility is to be authentically Catholic, to preach the gospel, to administer the sacraments, as well as to do charitable acts. And he said, quoting Pope Benedict, those three things are inseparable. You can't just hand out mosquito nets and claim to be doing Catholic charity. You're doing a humanitarian work, to be sure. But unless you're preaching the gospel, unless you're administering the sacraments, that is, unless you're doing Catholic charity in a Catholic context, in a Catholic way, you're not engaging in Catholic charity. And that's precisely what you cannot do if you're beholden to the government. Because if you get too Catholic, of course, the government is going to say, well, we can't support that. The crucifixes have to come down. You have to stop celebrating the Mass. When you hand out the mosquito nets, you can't preach the gospel. You can't talk about the saving message of Jesus Christ. You can't bring people salvation when you're bringing them food. But that's what we should be doing. We should be doing those things in conjunction with one another. Cardinal Robert Serra also talked about we need to recover the missionary zeal in our charitable works overseas. Well, if you're not hiring Catholics, how much missionary zeal are they going to have? How well are they going to understand the Catholic faith?
Exactly. You pointed out in this investigation that the loss of a single soul is incalculable. And that's the bottom line. This is about the salvation of souls. It's not just about feeding bellies as Catholics. It's about the salvation of souls. And how can we really say that we're concerned about that when we're facilitating groups, or even overseeing activities of people who are promoting intrinsic evils that cause destruction to lives and souls?
Yeah, I weep when I think about all of the women in the 125 districts in Madagascar who have been surgically and chemically sterilized under the supervision of Catholic relief services, and all of the children who didn't come into existence or who were sacrificed early on in their lives by these evil and immoral practices. Someday these people responsible are going to be standing before God, and He's going to ask them why they didn't preach the gospel and administer the sacraments, and how they allowed themselves to get involved in these programs that they know objectively are evil.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, our segment is up. I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight, and just thank you tremendously for your great work promoting life, and just keep fighting the good fight, and we're all rooting for you. So thanks so much. God bless you.
I appreciate knowing that. I appreciate the thoughts and prayers of all of our listeners out there, and we will continue to speak the truth about these programs, because ultimately I think if you read Pope Benedict's Deus Caritas Est, if you read the motu proprio that Pope Benedict issued a few months ago, it's very clear that Catholic charity has gone off the rails and needs to be reformed. And I think the Church will reform it in the months to come.
Well, let's hope and pray that does take place. So anyway, thank you so much again, Mr. Mosher. God bless you.
And you.
Okay, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I will welcome back to my show Michael Hichborn. We'll continue this discussion about CRS and the incredible report, 248-page report that he has painstakingly put together, and we will be right back. You're listening to Forward Boldly Radio. Please visit our homepage at blogtalkradio.com/forwardboldly. To get announcements before each show, click on the follow button at the top of the screen. You can also find us on Facebook. The mission of our apostolate is to spread the light of the one true faith through online media. Our hosts are entirely faithful to the magisterium and committed to the primary work of the Church, which is the salvation of souls. Please support our work through your prayers, and to make a secure donation, simply follow the link provided in this episode's show description, or otherwise visit blogtalkradio.com/forwardboldly and follow the URL address provided underneath the show title. We will keep all our benefactors in our prayers. Thank you for your support, and in the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward boldly. Back to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles, and we have with us my friend, Michael Hichborn. Welcome back to the show, Michael.
Good evening, Christine.
Great to have you back. I think this is your third time here. Michael Hichborn, of course, works for American Life League, and you have just put together a 248-page report on the funding practices of Catholic Relief Services, and it's excellent. I recommend everybody go ahead and take a look at it. Could you tell listeners where they can find it?
It's kind of a strange URL, but if you go to ALL's homepage, it should be posted there, www.all.org. I will go ahead and post a link to the full report on my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/michael.hichborn, Hichborn. So I've gone ahead and posted a link to it directly on the front page of my Facebook page. So if you want a direct link, you can go there.
Okay, great. Well, before we even get into that, you also put out a pretty good short video report where you raised some excellent points about the double standard between the funding practices of the CCHD, which is sort of the domestic charitable arm of the USCCB, and then CRS. So could you kind of summarize that for our listeners? What double standard is going on there?
Sure. Well, over the years, the Catholic Campaign for Human Development has, of course, been under fire because they have been funding organizations that were promoting abortion and birth control and homosexuality and Marxism and a whole bunch of other things. Some groups, like the Chinese Progressive Association, put out voter guides that were saying that we want people to vote for the legalization of same-sex marriage, we want people to vote for the legalization of prostitution, and that sort of thing. And the CCHD rightly cut off funding to that organization. Another one was the New York City AIDS Housing Network. They were distributing condoms. Now, it took a lot of convincing, but eventually the CCHD said, you know what, they're not eligible for future funding because they were distributing condoms. In fact, on their Truth About the CCHD page, they have a statement that says CCHD requires of each grantee the highest standards of accountability and conformity with the moral teaching of the Catholic Church. If a group commits an offense against Catholic moral teaching or undermines the Church's defense of the unborn or her promotion of the family, a grant qualification is rescinded. So these are some pretty strong guidelines or even just rules that the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, at least sometimes, will follow. But as stated, they're very good rules. Catholic Relief Services not only has no such rules, but makes excuses as to why it's going to give millions of dollars to organizations that are directly distributing abortifacient birth control, and in some cases, these organizations also hand out and manufacture and market what they call safe abortion kits.
Right, so you raise
this
double
discrepancy.
Standard. Exactly.
Oh, absolutely.
So
it's a total
bring
double
up this
standard.
Yeah, and so you raise it with CRS, and then they respond to you recently, publicly. And I was reading their response, and I just wanted to pull my hair out because, once again, this is so typical of CRS. They don't address any of your points at all. They just say, well, we're consulting with moral theologians, and we've got a careful vetting process, and you know what? All's agenda is just that CRS and the church should not engage with the outside world. Shame on them.
Oh, for crying out loud, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, that's it. And I was telling you this before. I was like, do they think that we're all 5-year-olds? Do they think we're idiots, that we can't see through that sort of evasion? I mean, it's ridiculous.
I think that they think that most of the people out there are idiots, or if they don't think that, I hope that's what they think, because then that means that they might believe that people would buy that kind of thing, which means they're idiots. But,
right.
You know, I can't figure out for the life of me why they say the things that they say, because in a lot of cases they don't even really make sense. They talk about fungibility being an issue. They say, well, the money that we give to these organizations isn't fungible, so therefore it's okay. But then they justify giving membership dues to organizations like Medicam, which is out there training abortionists in Cambodia, or they give dues memberships to organizations like Core Group, which spends over half of its entire budget on the distribution of family planning. So that money is directly fungible. I mean, and that comes from Catholic donations, by the way. That doesn't come from the grants and things like that they've been going through. This is Catholic money going to Medicam, going to Core Group, and CRS says, yeah, but that's the only way we can get into these areas so that we can work with these organizations, so that we can stand up and give the Catholic perspective on things.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, okay, that's great if that's happening, but where is it happening?
Right, exactly. Yeah. You know, you say here in the beginning of the report, I'm just going to read a little excerpt here. It says, American Life League has met privately on more than one occasion with CRS executives. All grave concerns have been routinely dismissed. For this reason, American Life League is compelled to present this fully documented report to the body of the faithful. The sincere hope is that the findings in this report will bring proper understanding and clarity of the facts. The intent of this report is to help equip the shepherds of the church to diagnose the problem and swiftly and resolutely take corrective action. So this is the purpose of this report. It's not scandal mongering. It's not simply to be mean and attack their good work, nothing like that. It's to address some very serious problems that they are refusing really to address.
Sure. Well, and you know, if you look in the executive summary of the report, we actually praise the good work of Catholic Relief Services, and we were very careful to say, you know, the thing is, if Catholic Relief Services wasn't distributing millions of dollars to organizations that are fighting directly against the culture of life, we never even would have said anything. We would have said, you know, we really like what CRS does, and if there's anything pro-life that they're doing, we'd be more than happy to tack our name to it. But we can't. And they are saying that we're attacking them as an organization, we're attacking their good works, but if that's the case, then we'd be talking about how we don't like them helping the poor, which doesn't make any sense either, since we do like helping the poor. So I don't really understand why, you know, I don't understand why they would characterize just the fact that we would like for them to stop funding organizations that push abortion and birth control. Characterize it as an attack. That doesn't make any sense to me.
And the most frustrating thing too is that they're being supported at the highest levels, even in the hierarchy. You know, I mentioned Bishop Kakanis before, and I was also very frustrated with Cardinal Dolan's response. I wanted to read it to you because he was recently talking to the media, and this is what he said in response to the critiques from American Life League, which is you and your people there, PRI, LifeSite News, all these other people. And he said, I've got to be honest with you, with particular groups, we're tempted to get so frustrated that we say they're never going to be happy. They don't trust us. They don't believe us. They seem to think that the best thing they can do is criticize. And we sometimes shrug and say all we can do is tell you that we've listened to you. We've looked into these allegations scrupulously. We're trying our best, and we're convinced that we act in complete consonance with Catholic teaching. What is your response to that?
Well, for one thing, that statement was issued before our report came out.
Okay.
In fact, it was issued before our statement was finished. So, but I think it's interesting. I mean, you and a bunch of others have taken that to mean that he was responding to American Life League, and there's a reason for that. If you look at a lot of the news reports that came out, I guess between July and now, a lot of them tend to make American Life League as the organization who's leading the charge against CRS. But the fact of the matter is, we hadn't issued any specific report about, we've reacted to certain things that showed up in the news, but we haven't issued any specific reports about CRS until just a couple of weeks ago. So for CRS and for a lot of these other news agencies to say American Life League is leading the charge and attacking CRS is really way out from left field, unless they're trying to say that, well, because American Life League was at the forefront of the revelations regarding the CCHD, then therefore they're the ones that are doing this too. Maybe that's their justification, but I can't put my finger on it.
Right. But even so, even if it's referring to other organizations, I'm not sure that Cardinal Dolan's response is a just or accurate one because... I agree with you. Now, I don't really know what's going through Cardinal Dolan's head, but I can say that what he is talking about with, how we're listening and we're paying attention and that kind of thing, listening and paying attention doesn't really address anything specific. It just says, well, they don't seem to be happy with any of the responses and they don't trust us. But Your Eminence, and if I were to respond, Your Eminence, we haven't been given anything to trust or verify. Right.
Because if you look at what LifeSite News and what PRI has put out, they have detailed very specific things in every single thing that they've put out. But the responses from CRS are very general, and they keep talking about CRS does good works, and CRS is always involved in helping the poor and helping to spread pro-life matters, and we always defend the unborn, and, da-da-da-da. So they spend a lot of time talking about their image and little to no time talking about the specific charges that were raised. And they might toss one or two lines to say, well, we are involved with this, but that's because we're involved with these other groups so that we can talk about the Catholic aspect of things. Right.
I think they even denied, when PRI discussed, they mentioned one of the employees in SanteNet who was distributing contraceptives and things like that, and he was working under the direction of CRS. They denied that this person even existed, or they couldn't even find him. And you were able to find him within 5 minutes doing a Google search. And then PRI said we were able to find his Facebook page within 5 minutes. So they didn't know what,
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get to this report, okay?
Yeah.
Can you kind of give us a summary of the findings in this report?
What we found is that 86% of all of the domestic grants that CRS distributed for the year 2012, that's $64+ million out of $75+ million, went to organizations that are directly funding abortion, birth control, contraception, sterilization, the whole gamut. Okay, these organizations, it's not about coalitions, it's not about these complex relationships. These organizations themselves are on the ground handing out contraceptive devices. And I'll give you an example. Population Services International, I like to pick on them because they have probably one of the clearest cases against them. Not that any of these are at all obscure. But you look at what Population Services International is all about, and it's mind-blowing that CRS would say, oh, we had no idea that they were handing out abortion or that they were, dispensing birth control on such a wide scale.
Yeah, tell our listeners a bit about the background of PSI.
Well, the founder of Population Services International was a major pornographer who made his millions, actually billions, in the sex toy mail industry. And then he took that money to create Population Services International for the specific purpose of population control. That's why it was created. And then later on in their reports, that's its mission. The preponderance of its work, if you will. And if you look at what they say about their work in Guinea or their work in Madagascar, they specify that their distribution of anti-malaria drugs and mosquito nets is a way for them to get their foot in the door so that they can also dispense birth control. And they say specifically, failure in one aspect of that project equals failure in the other. If they fail in the distribution of contraception, that means that they fail also with saving people from malaria.
Right. Now, for listeners out there who are not familiar with the background here, CRS was criticized for giving, what was it, $2.6 million to PSI?
2.8.
$2.8 million, and CRS defended itself by saying, well, none of that money went to, contraceptions or anything. It went towards passing out mosquito nets and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was their defense.
Sure, right. Except the year prior, they told LifeSite News that they would never fund Planned Parenthood because there is a threshold in terms of what the focus of an agency is and the preponderance of their work. But if they're going to say that about Planned Parenthood, how on earth can they possibly justify giving money to Population Services International?
Which essentially does the same thing.
Absolutely. And
they're the ones who give out
the
safe abortion kits, right?
Yes. They give out safe abortion kits. They are inserting IUDs. They are assisting with sterilizations. They are doing whatever they possibly can to increase the contraceptive prevalence rate in every single area that they are working.
Right, and like you said, they use charitable activities like passing out mosquito nets in order to gain a foothold in that country so that they can introduce their population control agenda.
Yep, absolutely.
Right. So they're just using CRS. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me that in a National Catholic Register article that came out about a month ago
by Peter Jesser Smith, yep.
One of the things that was said from CRS, and I don't remember whether it was Bishop Kakanis or somebody else who said it, but one of the responses from CRS was, we had no idea that they, were so deeply in the distribution of abortion, and, now we'll probably have to reconsider future funding of that organization. Excuse me, reconsider? I think that you need to start demanding the money back and saying, holy smokes, how did we ever let this pass, and then fire everybody that was involved in acquiring the grant for that organization.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there is absolutely no excuse for this.
There's no excuse at all. And that's why it's so shocking that the USCCB came out fully defending CRS, standing behind it, backing it 100%. It's very frustrating for the rest of us who can see so clearly that this is wrong. It's wrong, 100% wrong. There's no justification for it. To see this very weak response is very frustrating.
Absolutely, and then this all goes back to how CRS keeps defending it says that there's no discrepancy between the way CCHD handles its funding practices and the way CRS is handling its funding practices. There's a huge discrepancy. I mean, this isn't even a question. CRS says we'll go ahead and fund organizations like Population Services International, which is just as horrible as Planned Parenthood. And CCHD says we're going to cut off funding from an organization that's handing out condoms. I mean, I can't possibly see how they're operating under the same set of guidelines, which CRS seems to indicate that they are. Well,
they're not. There is a clear double standard, and the only response that they even gave you was to accuse you of saying, well, you really just don't want us to engage with the world. That's it.
If engaging with the world means funding organizations that are very similar to Planned Parenthood, maybe that's a yes. But if by engaging with the world we're talking about going into various locations and doing what you can on your own volition to help and to aid the poorest of the poor, of course I'm not saying that. And quite honestly, I don't understand why CRS feels the need to continue funding organizations that are as horrible as this.
Well, I think it comes down to what?
Is there something stopping them from not funding those organizations to continue on the good works that they were known for the last 40 years?
I think Stephen Mosher touched on it. They're very influenced by USAID money. And, just from the interviews that they did on the ground there, the overwhelming picture that you get from people who live there in Madagascar and see the way that CRS operates is they say they just operate like a secular NGO. A lot of them are just not very Catholic at all. They don't even work with the dioceses. So, you accept the money from the government, and the government itself is promoting abortion and contraception all throughout the world. Well, your hands aren't going to be very clean, and you're going to start compromising the way that you do things. But, I want to get back to this report. It was rather shocking for a lot of people to find out from this report that 86% of domestic grant money from CRS goes to groups that directly promote abortion, contraception, or sterilization. 86%. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Well, it's one thing to say that sometimes mistakes are made, but if you're making those mistakes 86% of the time, then you have a big problem.
Yeah, that's like almost 90%. That's almost 9/10 of all this money.
I mean, even CCHD's grants aren't that bad.
Right. Exactly. And so you looked at their IRS filings, and then you checked out all the different organizations that receive here in the United States that receive grants. So we're just talking about organizations here in the United States, not internationally. I mean, who knows how much internationally is going to groups that directly promote abortion, contraception. So you're looking here in the United States. What are some of these? Which group got the most money that was directly in contradiction?
The most money went to CARE International. It got $13,880,143. And CARE International, they've been beat up in the media by LifeSite News the most. But just to give you a rundown, they're actively promoting and distributing all forms of birth control. They called for the overturning of the Mexico City policy. They promote deviant sexuality in their documentation, their training programs. They partnered with Marie Stopes International for family planning projects. And just last year, they were an active participant in the London Summit on Family Planning. And at that summit, and I just want to briefly touch on this, there were 5 CRS grantees that were present at this summit, and the money that went to those grantees comprised of $34 million in CRS grants, roughly. But one of the goals of the summit, it says here about the London Summit on Family Planning, the summit called for unprecedented global political commitments and resources that will enable 120 million more women and girls to use contraceptives by 2020. And they have a list of goals here. They say that their goals are increasing the demand and supply for family planning, improving supply chains, systems, and service delivery models, and fostering innovative approaches to family planning challenges. Everything about the London Summit on Family Planning was about how much can we increase the use of contraception throughout the third world. That's exactly what it was about. And so, CARE International, on the 8th of May in 2013, issued what they called a commitment to the London Summit on Family Planning goals. And I'll just read you a couple of excerpts here. It says, CARE International commits to putting reproductive rights, women's empowerment, and gender equality at the center of its sexual, reproductive, and maternal health programming and policy work by developing approaches for addressing gender and social barriers to increased family planning use. It says CARE also commits to ensuring women and girls' family planning and reproductive health needs are addressed in both development, emergency, and post-conflict response activities. In other words, every single time CARE is involved in some sort of emergency situation, it's conflict-related situations like where there's a war or some sort of civil strife, but also in its development programs. So even if they're just boosting up the poor, in all of those areas, it says it is ensuring that women and girls' family planning and reproductive health needs are going to be addressed. So they're going to be distributing birth control in all of those situations, in everything that they do.
You're right, and CRS grant money is going directly to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's going directly to that organization, and CRS says, well, it's not going directly to those programs. But come on, if you're going to give millions of dollars to CARE International and then stand side by side with them, or even as with Steve Mosher's report, show that CRS and CARE have both of their little logos on the same business cards,
Yeah.
You're giving a clean face to that organization, which will enable people to look at that group and say, you know what, the Catholic Church likes them, so I guess they're safe. And when they come back with abortion and birth control, they're going to trust them.
Exactly. It's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. So what is there to do here, Michael? What is there to do? Just continue to shine the spotlight on this until some sort of reform is...
The truth is like a splinter. It hurts real bad when you hide it, but it always finds a way out. And so the real thing here is just to continue praying and fasting for the bishops, because they have a very hard road to haul when it comes to addressing this matter. And to continue
Should we continue to give money to CRS?
Well, I'm not.
I'm not either. Now, they're the ones who do Operation Rice Bowl, right, during Lent?
Yes. Yeah.
That's them. Okay.
They do.
So remember
they
that.
do Operation Rice Bowl, and so keep that in mind. When I think about what CRS is doing and their excuses and everything else, I have an analogy that I like to draw. Imagine a Catholic college was paying Planned Parenthood to come on its campus to conduct breast cancer screenings or STD tests for students. It doesn't matter how tightly controlled those funds are for the strict purpose of the screenings and the STD tests. The prestige and the friendly face to the college helps Planned Parenthood acquire is what is gravely scandalous.
Exactly.
Because the students will see, well, Planned Parenthood is here to help us, with our breast cancer screenings, so I guess they're trustworthy. And the college invited them on campus and even paid them.
Exactly, and you lend credibility.
So that means it must be okay, right? And that's exactly what's happening on the ground, and that is why CRS cannot give money to organizations like CARE and Save the Children and JPIGO and ADRA and PSI. I could go on and on and on.
Amen to that. I agree 100%. And, the hour's coming to a close, so, Michael, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be here. Again, I'm sure it's not going to be the last time, but keep up the excellent work, you and everyone at American Life League.
Well, thank you much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening in. I will be back. I'm not sure if I'll be back next week or not, but just stay tuned. Check out the Forward Boldly Facebook page for updates. And as always, keep fighting the good fight of the faith. And in the words of St. Joan of Arc, in God's name, forward boldly. Okay, good night, everybody. God bless you.